Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for joining tonight's virtual community meeting hosted by the City of Colorado Springs. My name is Angela Wolcott, and I will be your facilitator tonight as we talk about the Platte Avenue Corridor Study. Platte Avenue is a Connectcos community corridor, and it's been identified as a priority corridor for further analysis. Tonight's meeting is being recorded and will be made available to the public on the City of Colorado Springs project website following the meeting. www.coloradosprings.gov/Platte, Platte, AVE corridor, CORRIDOR. Before we get started tonight, it is my pleasure to introduce the city's co-project manager, Erin Egbert, for welcoming remarks. Erin?
Thank you, Angela. I'd like to welcome you to our meeting tonight. This is an exciting project. It's going to have some challenges too. But thank you for your time. Thank you for participation. And hopefully you get some value out of this meeting tonight. Platte Corridor is really it's got a lot of history to it. It used to be a CDOT highway up until about 30 years ago. So the city's been working on it. The city has started off with a planned COS, which was kind of a neighborhood planning effort for the community that morphed into the Connectcos. And now with that Connectcos, we're treating this Platte Corridor study as a pilot project underneath that umbrella. So we're really going to be able to dig deep and figure out what the corridor needs are. It will also have a very multimodal focus for this corridor. It's going to be challenging. There's a lot of existing neighborhoods, existing businesses, a lot of existing users on the corridor, and change is always difficult. But I want to thank you for your time tonight, and hopefully you get something out of it, and it's enjoyable for the project team as well as you. Back to you, Angela.
Great, thank you, Erin. Tonight, I am joined by a number of other transportation experts from the City of Colorado Springs and also from our project team, some of which you will be hearing more from here shortly. They include Dan Kruger, City of Colorado Springs Project Manager, Ted Richard and Kelly Ledbetter, Consultant Team Project Managers, Zach Barr and Sarah Franklin, Communications and Public Involvement Specialists. Last but not least, the technical team and subject matter experts tonight include Anna Laborn, Mariana Stuck, Amy Geringer, and Eric Gunderson. Now let's take a moment to talk about the meeting format. Tonight, we are using Microsoft Teams Live to conduct this meeting. As I mentioned earlier, this meeting is being recorded. The recording of the meeting will be made available after tonight's meeting in the next couple of business days. Just visit www.coloradosprings.gov/Platte AVE corridor to find the recording along with all of the meeting presentation materials. For our Spanish-speaking community members, a quick word from my colleague, Christian Mendez.
Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Gracias por atender esta junta. Quisiéramos informarles que tendremos capción en vivo. Para poder acceder a las capciones, hagan clic abajo de la pantalla y podrán ver captions abiertas. Hagan clic y podrán ver capciones en español. Gracias.
Great. Thank you so much, Christian. We have participants that have also joined us tonight, not only by computer, but as well by mobile app, to learn more about this transportation planning effort in your neighborhood. It's an important project called Platte Avenue Corridor Study. Reminder, if you're participating by phone audio only or by mobile app and would like to see the presentation after the meeting, just go to the project website, www.coloradosprings.gov, Platte AVE corridor for a meeting recording and for the materials that we are presenting. This is not required for the meeting tonight. Next, I'm going to talk about some important meeting instructions that will help ensure a smooth meeting. We will go over 4 key things for you to know. This first box shows that you have an option to adjust your volume, play and pause the content. The pause button allows you to pause the meeting. This is possible as the meeting is being recorded. The second box has a computer-generated caption setting. Click the gear icon to open these settings. Once you see the pop-up, click the caption box, the button, to enable this. Reminder, you have the option to enable Spanish captions tonight. The third box is particularly important as it is the way that you will be able to send questions to the technical support team. So click Ask a Question, a text box will appear, and then you are able to enter a message. The final box has additional audio settings. This is particularly important to note if you are using headphones and can't seem to hear. Reminder, if you did not see the live event Q&A, click the question icon on the left. Let me tell you a little bit about how to provide feedback during tonight's public meeting. Tonight, we have a lot of information to get through in the beginning to ensure that everyone has a shared understanding of the project. About a third of the way into the meeting, we are going to have an interactive activity, a series of polling questions. We will be asking about study area opportunities and challenges, and we encourage everyone to please participate along with us. We will provide specific directions as we get closer to that section of the meeting. We will also do a preview of the project website a little bit later to share more about some online engagement opportunities. You will hear from our panel of experts throughout the presentation. They are not able to hear you. If you have a non-technical question or a project-related question, please either click the Ask a Question box or submit them online through the virtual meeting comment card at our project website. That comment card will be available online until June 30th. At the end of tonight's meeting, we will try to save time to answer a few of the questions that have come in and been submitted during the meeting. If we run out of time, we will summarize all of these questions in the coming days into a document called Frequently Asked Questions, and we will publish it on the project website. So now let's take a moment to talk about the meeting purpose and the agenda. This is the official launch of the project. We are very excited about that. So it's very important for us to be able to start a conversation with you about Platte Avenue. Also, we want to develop a common understanding of the project. Most importantly, we want to hear from those of you that live, work, and recreate in the area about corridor conditions and challenges, and then continue to share ways to engage and stay involved with the project team in the coming months. We are going to divide tonight's meeting into a few sections. We will start with a project overview to share more about the goals of the project, the overall schedule, the goal framework, and known challenges that we have already started to hear to date. Around 6 p.m. or so, we will start our first interactive activity to learn more about your thoughts of the study area and the Platte Avenue corridor. Before we wrap up tonight, we'll have time to review various ways in which you can learn more about this effort and participate online in our digital engagement map-based tool. So more to come on that. Reminder for those of you that are just now joining us, we will be asking a series of polling questions closer to 6 p.m. If you have any questions after tonight's meeting, please visit the project website, www.coloradosprings.gov/Platte Ave AVE corridor to learn more and fill in the digital comment card. Although this is a virtual meeting, we do have a few participation guidelines. We want to feel like we are in person. So please remember, the spirit of the meeting is to be collaborative and provide productive ideas for the team to be able to have the project be successful. Respect the ideas of others. We welcome diverse opinions and encourage participants to be open to others' point of views and participate in however you feel most comfortable and focus on the task at hand. There is a lot going on in the broader community, and we are here for this specific process. Given the limited amount of time that we have here together, we need to stay on agenda. When ideas arise that fall outside of this project, we will do our best to connect you to the appropriate resource. Okay, so In just a moment, we will be doing our first test polling question to get everyone prepared for the activity later in the meeting. Before we do, let's take a look at the overall project schedule to give everyone a sense of where we are in this process. On the screen, you can see that we are currently in a corridor analysis phase of the project. That means we're looking at existing data, current conditions, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and challenges. We will then begin to identify a range of solutions and initial alternatives. That means that we will later get into prioritizing and comparing solutions. Eventually, there will be a cost and project identification phase that will take us into program development and refinement, eventually leading to the final plan and recommendation. Public involvement and stakeholder engagement will be imperative at each step of this schedule and is considered an important part of a successful project like this. If you have just joined us tonight, welcome. We are about to ask a sample polling question to prepare everybody for an activity that we have later this evening. For those of you that are participating with a computer or smartphone, we just posted some polling instructions on the screen for you to see. I will also read them out loud. To participate on Poll Everywhere via your browser or mobile device, please click or type in this link, https://KWPOLL1. To participate on Poll Everywhere via text message, please text KWPO, P as in Paul, OLL1. Let me repeat that, I stumbled a little. So KWPOLL1. And you want to text that to number 22333. Again, this is up on the screen, so please take a look at that. You will not need to enter this again later in the meeting. If you do it once, you're set for the rest of the evening. Please provide your answers to this question that we ask when prompted. All right, so let's test this out. Let's give it a shot. So for those of you that are not able to see the screen, please let me read it to you. How did you hear about tonight's virtual community meeting? You have a few choices here. So A, social media, B, project website, C, newspaper or conventional media. Next, D, bus advertisement, E as in Edward, a meeting flyer or poster, F, neighbor or word of mouth, and G, other. Great, so we are actually able to see your results a little bit sooner than the participants are. So we're going to allow about 1 to 2 minutes per question. Even later in the meeting, we'll do the same thing. But these are real-time results coming in right now. So in just a moment, we're going to take a look at what people selected. Great, this is good activity here. So it seems like it's kind of bouncing around a little bit between social media. So several of you have heard about this through some type of online content. We did promote it through Facebook and Nextdoor. And then several of you also selected other. Great, so fantastic. Hopefully that gives everybody a sense for how these questions will work later. We appreciate people participating. You can continue to participate as we get into our next section here. So thank you, everyone. Now, I would like to introduce Kelly Ledbetter. She's one of the project managers on the consultant team. She will provide a little bit of a project overview for us tonight. Kelly?
Thanks, Angela. So tonight I have the opportunity to share with you a little bit about some recent planning efforts that have been happening in this city, as well as some initial findings related to Platte Avenue. So on the screen, you can see that Platte Avenue corridor study is one of many studies that is taking place at the neighborhood and corridor level as a result of previous planning efforts through the Connectcos transportation plan. The Connectcos transportation plan is still happening and active. So if you've participated in any phases of that public outreach to date, thank you. We are just at the beginning of our process for the neighborhood and corridor study, but we will be synthesizing past and current plans, just like the Connectcos framework is currently doing as well, related to regional plans, mode-specific plans like the COS bikes, and the policy plans like the Complete Streets Policy Framework. All of these other planning efforts will have an influence upon the Platte Avenue corridor study. So our project team is working in close coordination with other project teams and those specifically for Connectcos as we develop this plan. One thing to note, and I know Angela noted this kind of at the beginning of the plan, is that Platte Avenue is one of the priority corridors or critical corridors that have been identified through the early phases of the Connectcos planning effort. So we're getting started. On the next slide, you will see the Connectcos goal framework. There are 6 goals included in the framework, and these are goals that are going to be consistent for our project along Platte Avenue as well. They include safe, equitable, sustainable, efficient, reliable, accessible, and connected. I won't go through all of the sub-bullets that are listed on this slide, but as you can see, each of these goal framework areas envision a transportation system that meets these six areas. So these are just kind of the high-level categories that we will be using to kind of frame our evaluation and frame our recommendations along Platte Avenue. There are a handful of study requirements that were outlined by the city. And so, as you can see, that some are related to an improvement plan specific to Platte Avenue. Others are related to some of the engagement that Angela highlighted. We want this plan to be a reflection of the community's overall interest and desires for transportation, multimodal transportation. And then we also want to understand what those short and long-term needs are and identify solutions that are needed both immediately and then also in the future as well. One final thing to note related to the study requirements is that we will be looking for funding opportunities to fund these projects, and it could be in coordination with other departments within the city, as well as Public Works, or in partnership with other regional agencies. When we talk about Platte Avenue, we're not just talking about the individual kind of back of curb to back of curb, or the immediate right-of-way on Platte Avenue. We are considering that, but in addition to that, we are also considering the neighborhoods and the surrounding areas. So when we talk about the Platte Avenue corridor study, I'll explain kind of on the next slide and show you on a map kind of the full area and the full extent that we're planning to consider. This includes adjacent roads and how impacts and improvements made to Platte Avenue may have an impact on the adjacent roadway network. It's considering just the context in the surrounding neighborhoods. The Route 5, which goes along Boulder Street and also along Platte Avenue, it's one of Mountain Metro's highest performing routes. So while it doesn't run immediately along Platte Avenue, it has implications for transit riders. And so we'll be considering the impacts to the transit network as well. And I think last to highlight is that the trail connections, certainly Shook's Run, which is existing, and some opportunities near Sand Creek are also present. And so we've been evaluating those. So those will be considerations as well. So as you can see on this next slide, this is the entire study area that we're considering. The study area, when we talk about the Platte Avenue corridor study, extends between I-25 on the west and Powers Boulevard on the east. The corridor is just over 6 miles long, and it used to be a state highway. So in many places, It still kind of feels and functions like a state highway because pretty minimal improvements have been made to the corridor since it was decommissioned from the state highway to a city street. In some areas along the corridor, the road, still retains those wide travel lanes, the higher speed limits, and there's still a handful of frontage roads on the eastern side of the corridor. The corridor has a significant role in connecting travelers from downtown to neighborhoods in the eastern part of the city, to other destinations like the airport, and even some of the newer developments like Banning Lewis Ranch out east. Those traveling along the corridor vary quite a bit as well. And, we see that it's local residents that live in adjacent neighborhoods. It's employees traveling to and from different destinations such as downtown, and also visitors. There are more than a handful of visitors that are accessing local destinations like the Olympic and Paralympic Training Center, Memorial Hospital, and destinations right adjacent to the corridor as well. Future travel forecasts indicate that Platte Avenue may experience up to 20% growth by 2040. And the travel time reliability for the corridor, so how reliable we can assume and expect the corridor to be, is actually in the bottom 25% of all major corridors in the city. So this is information, for example, that we know because we're studying all corridors in the city through the Connectcos effort. I should highlight, like I discussed earlier, that there are significant creek crossings like Shook's Run, and 2 crossings of the Sand Creek. So from an infrastructure standpoint, there are aging bridges along the corridor, either related to the creeks or because of the grade separation that will be considered. So the project team has divided the corridor into 4 kind of distinct areas. These areas vary in character and range from the historic neighborhoods on the west side to kind of the commercial areas and kind of redeveloping retail areas on the east side. And that's what I'm will highlight for you now. So the first area we'll look at is the western portion of the study area. This portion of the study area includes Platte Avenue between I-25 and the Pikes Peak Greenway Trail and Union Boulevard right there. This includes the downtown neighborhood and the Middle Shook's Run neighborhood. So Platte Avenue, despite being a major east-west corridor serving the city, does not currently provide direct access to I-25. So for those exiting the highway and seeking to go eastbound, there are more than a handful of turns that have to be made to access Platte Avenue. And likewise, in the westbound direction, if someone is headed westbound and would like to go onto I-25, there's significant turns that need to be made in order to do that. Being in an established area of town, this section of the corridor has a pretty complete sidewalk network, and some bicycle facilities on lower stress streets are provided on parallel facilities, not directly on Platte, but on a handful of the parallel route. And so I should note that, while the sidewalk network is nearly complete in this downtown area, the sidewalks may be narrow or they may not be currently ADA compliant. So one of our tasks is to evaluate the condition of the sidewalks and ensuring that that is up to current design standards and universally accessible. I think as many of you know, the Shook's Run Trail is a beloved trail for those that kind of walk and bike in this area. It's relatively easy to cross Platte Avenue using Shook's Run because it's grade separated there and you don't have to interact with the traffic. But those bridges right there at that grade separation are in really poor condition and in need of pretty immediate replacement. So that's also something that we'll be looking at critically in this corridor. One other thing to note is that the Pikes Peak Greenway Trail, which runs through Monument Valley Park, is a pretty key connection to travel north-south if you're walking or biking, and so further connections to that trail will be considered. This area sees significant walking and biking activity, in part because of the destinations nearby with the high school and Boulder Park, the hospital, like I said, the Olympic and Paralympic Training Center, and in part because it's easier to get around because there are opportunities and facilities provided. So that's one of the assets and things we know that people really utilize quite a bit in this area. And so we'll ensure that this type of connectivity is retained and even enhanced. So the next area that we're looking at, sometimes we refer to it as West Central. I think more of you likely know it as the Nob Hill area. This includes the section of Platte Avenue between Union Boulevard and Chelton Boulevard, right there on the west side of the Citadel Mall. This area primarily includes the Nob Hill neighborhood. We start to see that more sidewalks are missing along Platte Avenue and in this neighborhood. And so that compromises the ability for people to walk around the neighborhood. And this is concerning because Nob Hill has a relatively higher percentage of residents that do not have access to a vehicle, who must rely on walking or biking or taking transit or even carpooling to meet their basic needs. So in addition to looking at the condition of the multimodal transportation facilities, we will be looking in to the demographic information to better understand what the transportation needs may be for those residents and those employees of these neighborhoods. One thing to note also about the Nob Hill area is that emergency response time and multimodal access to Memorial Hospital is absolutely key. So Platte Avenue certainly serves that and needs to have travel time reliability that the hospital and those seeking medical services, whether immediately or just for other appointments, can have access to the hospital. In looking at the data, we know that there are a number of challenging intersections along this section of the corridor, including Platte Avenue at Boulder Street, Platte Avenue at Circle Drive, and Platte Avenue at Chelton. At these intersections specifically, we see a significant delay for vehicles, and so that will be one thing that this project also seeks to address. We discussed this earlier, but Platte Avenue has been identified as a gateway into downtown Colorado Springs, particularly for those traveling westbound. But currently the surrounding character of the corridor is pretty unwelcoming. And so that'll be something that you might get more in this presentation. So the third portion of the study area includes Platte Avenue and the surrounding neighborhoods between Chelton Road and Wooten Road. This area primarily includes the Citadel Mall area and the Citadel retail. This section of the corridor retains that state highway characteristics with higher speeds, wider travel lanes, and those frontage roads. The ability to cross Platte Avenue when walking or biking becomes much more difficult in these areas because of the widths of the roadway and the speed of the vehicles. You know, it's a very unwelcoming experience should you have to cross the roadway to catch a bus, you know, as you're walking or by bike. It's loud and it can take a lot of time. Generally, it's just a stressful experience. So that is something that we're seeking to address as well. We've also heard in our interviews with stakeholders that transferring by transit at the Citadel Mall Transfer Center can often be delayed. And so that, increases the amount of time that it takes to access the next kind of bus that people are taking. Another thing to note through the previous planning efforts that have been completed is that Academy Boulevard running north-south has been identified as a transit corridor through other planning efforts. So that'll be something we'll be coordinating and see if there's any opportunity then to, decrease delay for those that are transferring at the transfer center and look at the transit operations on Academy Boulevard. In this section as well, we do see that there are a handful of poorly performing intersections. One that I'll note specifically is Murray Road and the frontage roads that are immediately adjacent to that intersection, essentially creating 3 intersections right in a row could be contributing to this. Lastly, in this section, it's worth noting that there's significant truck volumes along this section. So the number of trucks seen on a daily basis is significant. So the last portion of the corridor is Platte Avenue and the surrounding neighborhoods between Wooten Road and Peterson Road. This area is characterized by significant commercial uses and provides access to regional destinations such as the Peterson Air Force Base and the airport. And again, in this section, the ability to cross Platte Avenue when walking and when biking becomes more difficult because of the width of the road and the speed of the vehicles. Platte Avenue crosses the Sand Creek in multiple locations in this area, and there are planned future regional trails along the creek. So again, previous planning efforts are kind of influencing what we're considering, and hopefully we can integrate all of those previous planning efforts into our current planning effort. This section of the corridor has a high level of severe crashes, vehicular crashes specifically, and crashes involving bicyclists and pedestrians. So as we look at improvements, particularly in this section, improving safety is going to be a priority. Lastly, in this section, again, going back to what I was saying earlier, we're not just looking at the physical roadway and what's happening right away to right away. We're also looking at what is happening around the corridor. And one of those things to consider is development that is planned east of the corridor and kind of in the eastern part of the city. One of those developments being Banning Lewis Ranch. So these newer developments are anticipated to contribute to the significant increases in traffic volumes along the corridor, and that is something that will be a priority to figure out and find a solution that's suitable both in the near term and in the long term. So those are just some transportation highlights and things that we've learned to date as we evaluate the existing conditions data. There is a lot more that Anna is now going to join us and share as it relates to the surrounding neighborhoods, and I'll let her share.
Thanks, Kelly. Just to start, I want to pass along an online meeting announcement that you should scroll down all the way through the Q&A box in order to see announcements. So with that, I wanted to start by saying that with this study, we began by examining demographic data and conducted an economic and market analysis. And one of the things that becomes apparent very quickly is that the corridor has a much slower population growth than the city and the county. It varies from a rate of 0.47 in 2010 and 1.35% in 2020, while the city and county grew at rates of 1.42 and 1.58, so much faster in those locations. Our next slide shares a little bit about what we learned about the housing. If you want to advance to that one. We've been looking at housing in the corridor, and you can see that there is much older housing than found elsewhere in the city, specifically segments 1 and 2 in downtown and Nob Hill. There's been very limited development of new housing, and of the new housing developed, nearly all of it has been single-family homes. The corridor has no new multifamily development within the last 10 years. Next slide, please. Platte Avenue corridor also has a median household income that's lower than the city and the county average. As shown in this map, the very northern edge of downtown that's in this segment has had in 2020 a median household income of $28,918, the lowest of the 4 segment areas, and drastically lower than both the median household income of the city at $64,000 and the county, which is higher than that. The West Central segment area's 2020 median household income is the highest of the 4 segment areas, but still drastically lower than both the median household incomes of the city and the county. Here, the next slide, which shows that most people currently living along the corridor are renting, and they don't own their properties. And there's a severe lack of diversity of housing types for those rentals. Despite slow population and economic growth throughout the corridor, the market capitalization rate for all asset types has continued to decrease over the past 10 years. A decreasing capitalization rate is a good economic indicator that the perceived risk of investing in an area is decreasing. This means the corridor has an opportunity to attract new development in the future while celebrating and protecting its assets. Okay.
All right. So if everyone can hear me, I believe that we are now going to talk a little bit more about what we've heard to date. So thank you, Anna, for walking us through the information about current analysis and data. That was very helpful. On the screen now, you can see that we have started to have some initial conversations with stakeholders, and we are going to be talking in a moment here about some of the different themes we've heard to date. Really quickly, I just want to remind people that have just joined us to submit comments or questions after the meeting tonight. All you need to do is go to the project website and complete the online comment card at www.coloradosprings.gov/Platte Ave AVE corridor. Meeting materials along with the meeting recording will be available after tonight's meeting. So now let's take a look at some of these key themes of what we've been collecting over the last few weeks and some of these initial conversations we've been having. And these have been with community organizations and a variety of stakeholders. So the first screen here, these were discussions that we had in small group and some workshops and also some one-on-one conversations. So high level, we've heard from several people talk about that Platte Avenue is really poised for a big transformation in order to better serve the surrounding community. We've also heard that the corridor is seen as a gateway to many destinations, both at the East End and the West End, but that the current character is not as welcoming as people would like it to be. We've heard that the current corridor is a key transit route and that would like to be maintained, and that it actually functions very reasonably and has high ridership. There's also a desire for people to be able to walk and bike in the adjacent neighborhoods, but currently crossing Platte is a bit of a barrier and poses some concerns. And then also accessing I-25 from Platte Avenue is difficult for all modes, including bicycles, but obviously we've heard that the most from motor vehicles. And then last year, as one of our main themes that we've heard, the city has received feedback that living directly on Platte Avenue, in some areas that it can begin to impede some of the quality of life just due to high traffic, some noise, and then again, the inability to be able to cross north-south. The next slide, this talks a little bit more about just some of the other priorities that we've started to hear in some of these initial conversations. So we've gone ahead and have broken these into some major themes. So the next two slides, I'll just touch on a couple of these points, but the first one here talks about understanding the function and identity. So what we've heard from some stakeholders is that there is a need to better understand how the current transportation system contributes to the city's broader mobility goals. And that was talked about a little bit earlier when Kelly discussed the Connectcos goal framework. And also here that establishing the corridor as a multimodal gateway to other destinations could strengthen the overall experience. Another big bucket here is walkability and safety. So we heard this in almost all of our conversations. So the lack of safe and walkable connections, Kelly also talked about this a little bit a moment ago. In some sections, particular the first segment of the corridor in the map that Kelly showed in the downtown area, there are more complete sidewalks, but they're missing in other sections of the corridor. So people are asking for that to be looked at during this study for improved safety. The third big bucket is accessibility. So knowing that the study area is home to a diversity of all people, including ages and abilities, including families, college students, people that are aging in place, Paralympic athletes, etc. So there needs to be a real close look at how to make sure that the corridor is truly accessible. And a key challenge is currently just the existing infrastructure. Again, going back to safety and talking a little bit about some of the safety concerns, in particular at some of the key intersections. The last big bucket on this slide talks about transportation choice and how important that is to people. So we're hearing that a lot of community members, perhaps just like you, really want to make sure that there's a variety of commuting options. So meaning people want to be able to travel in multiple different ways. And then there was concerns raised about some of the areas along Platte that they do see bicyclists and it's not considered very safe in some areas. So they would like to see a more balanced approach to options that people currently are not driving motor vehicles, or they may not have access to a car. So what are some of those other options that could be considered? The next slide talks about the last few themes that we've started to identify. Maintenance and appearance. This just talks again about sort of the same theme from earlier, that this is really viewed as a gateway, especially people that are coming in from the airport. So looking at ways to improve the current character. A lot of people did say that they identify and recognize that it was a carryover as a previous highway, Highway 24, in fact. And wanting to make sure that this is a great opportunity to really maximize the vision and turn this into a great first impression for that gateway and people visiting perhaps for the first time. Street network and connectivity was another theme, talking a little bit about just some of the traffic patterns, again, maybe some of the carryover from the old Highway 24 days. So people would like to see some improvements, in particular when you get closer to the downtown area, and especially we heard that as it relates to trying to get in and out when it comes to I-25 and connectivity there. And then celebrating and preserving neighborhood character. We recognize, and Kelly talked about, some of the residential areas that this corridor goes through. So people are asking for the team to be thinking about ways to preserve some of those distinct characteristics and also make sure that they're celebrated. And the last bullet here, I guess number 8, the last theme that we have to date, talks about how the team needs to consider community growth and how it could impact the study. So for example, just being mindful of some of the various uses along Platte Avenue as development continues to occur outside of the corridor. All right, so those are some of the major themes of what we have heard to date in some of our initial conversations with community members and stakeholders. Now it's time to turn to our first interactive activity. We tested this earlier. If you were able to join first thing, we walked through a sample question. So we will go ahead and put those instructions back up on the screen. So please follow these simple instructions here if you did not do this earlier. For those of you that have already texted in the text KWPOLL1 to 22333, you do not need to do that again. You're all set. For others participating via your browser or mobile device, just please click on this link here that we've provided, https://poll.com/KWPOLL1. All right, so we are going to remind you to please provide your answers as we go. We would like to see a lot of participation here. I am going to ask that I have a couple of people from the project team join me as we go through and look at some of these results as they come in. So in just a moment, we're going to flip to our first question, but first I would like to welcome Kelly back to the screen, or at least we're going to hear one another. You won't be able to see us here in a minute. We're going to focus on the questions, but you'll hear Kelly Ledbetter as well as Ted Richard. And Dan Egbert will also, I believe, join us for a portion of these questions as well. So welcome others. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Yes.
Thanks, Angela.
Great.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the results.
All right, fantastic. So our first question. So please remember to participate. Please select one answer from the following choices. So this is a great question to start us off. How often do you travel the Platte Avenue corridor? A, you travel daily. B, weekly. C, monthly. D, rarely. Or E, hardly ever or never. So remember, please select one answer from these choices. And we will allow about 1 to 2 minutes per question because we are on a little bit of a delay. The questions are providing real-time results, but we see the results a few seconds before you do. So we're going to allow a minute or two here. And I'm going to ask the project team. So You know, Dan, why do you think it's so important to consider frequency of travel in this current corridor?
Well, this is Ted.
Okay, Ted, great.
I mean, it's important because it just tells us a little bit more about who's using the corridor. Certainly we want to hear from people that are using the corridor as well as people that live along the corridor. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we explore what is the function of the corridor. Right now, it has to serve a lot of different purposes, from getting people to their homes and businesses along the corridor, as well as it's also trying to still fulfill a role of a former state highway.
Great, that's really helpful, Ted. It does look like we have seen a little bit of lull in the responses coming in, so I think it's safe to say that we're looking at a good representative number here, a fairly large percent, so close to 40% of you answered saying that you travel Platte Avenue almost daily. And then close by that follows in second that over 30% of you said that you travel it weekly. So that's fantastic. And even 25% approximately are traveling the Platte Avenue corridor monthly. So, and I will note that it looks like, and some of you are seeing this right along with me, but there was actually nobody that selected never. So I'm glad to see that the participants here are actually familiar with the corridor. That will help us understand current conditions. I'm going to get us into the second question team to make sure we have time to talk about that a little bit as well. So the next question is, what is your preferred mode of travel in and along Platte Avenue? So it looks like a few of you already got a hang of it. Or at least one of you. So we have some responses coming in. The options here to select from are A, you currently prefer to walk. B, you prefer to bicycle in and along the corridor. C, you take transit or bus in and along the corridor. D, car or motorcycle. And then E for other. So please go ahead, select your answers now. So I'm going to turn it back over to Kelly and Ted and see, this is really interesting. I'm not seeing a lot of movement here. So what are your thoughts? Oh, we're getting a couple more here. What are your thoughts about this, Ted and Kelly?
Yeah, so I mean, certainly we see thousands of vehicles, cars, trucks, and motorcycle pass through this corridor every day. And so I'm not surprised to see that as kind of the initial response, that 9 out of 10 responses so far are for the car and motorcycle. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Okay. So we know this is a popular corridor for people to drive east and west in order to make bigger city-wide connectivity. So it does make sense that we're seeing selection D most often on this one. And it's helpful for us just to have that confirmed tonight with participants. So that's very helpful. The next couple of questions will also.
I would note, Angela, is it is not easy to bike on Platte Avenue. And, we've heard from those that do take transit that it can be delayed quite a bit. So I think there could be a chicken and an egg here, that there may not be a preferred, a preference or a desire to bike along Platte because it currently doesn't provide safe facilities for that. You have to be a really confident bicyclist to do that. So I think we will look more into that and have continued conversations with the community to better understand that. One plug I will say is in the final part of this meeting, we will talk about other opportunities to provide additional comments that are related, specifically to geographic locations. And so we'd love to hear that feedback as well.
Yeah, that's a great point, Kelly, that these are current responses. So how people are currently using the corridor for travel. So yes, in the future, maybe that would change. And And also, I do wonder, part of me has to wonder if the pandemic did change some of people's at least temporary travel options in and around the city or on some of these major corridors. So, okay, we will go ahead and go. We have several more questions. So let's go ahead and turn to question 3. Okay, so this question here asks, how do you primarily use Platte Avenue? There's a lot of choices here, so please look closely at this screen. You are allowed to select multiple answers, so feel free to select more than one. A, to get home, B, to get to work, C, to get to the airport, D, to get to I-25, E, to access downtown, F, to access business and retail, G, to access services such as social services, healthcare, or childcare, H, all of the above, or I typically don't use Platte Avenue. J would be other. So please go ahead and select. And I'm going to turn it back over to Ted and ask Ted, how do you primarily use Platte Avenue, Ted?
Well, first off, I'm just impressed as heck at how fast people start clicking responses. So very much appreciate the feedback. Let me see. I use Platte Avenue to get to my office downtown. I use it to access the eastern part of town. And I certainly, there's several businesses along the corridor that I visit on occasion. So I don't live along the corridor, but I certainly use it.
Great. Good. This is good to hear. And it seems like several others, it's pretty well mixed, and that's kind of interesting and fun to see. So we have some good variety here. And so those of you that are able to see it and those of you that are not, it looks like about 15% are saying to get back and forth to their home, as well as get to work. The other one that really pops off the chart here is access to downtown, as well as access to business and retail. So right now, I think we'll leave it at that because those seem to be the 4 that are trending the highest, and we do have some more questions to get through. Let's go ahead and move to our next question, please. Great. So this question is question 4. If you do use Platte Avenue, what is your most frequent destination? So this here is an open answer. You can type anything in here, and we just want to get a sense of what is along the corridor and or adjacent or nearby that you're using Platte to get to your destination. Great. So here come some answers now. So I will say that my most recent destination along Platte was a doctor's office, and that's where I found it really easy, very direct, no significant delays. So that, and I'm seeing a few other answers here. So no surprises here that some people are going all the way out east in the corridor study area, right? Right, Ted and Kelly, what are your thoughts about some of these answers?
Okay, I can go ahead. Yeah, similar to the previous question, I appreciate just the variety. I think it speaks to how varied the needs are of the different users of the corridor. Certainly downtown, I think, we've seen quite a bit of redevelopment in the downtown area. So there are still a strong number of people that are accessing jobs downtown, but I think increasingly people are going downtown for restaurants and businesses, and there's activities and events in the evenings that people are seeking out downtown. And I'm thinking, specifically along the corridor right there at Acacia Park and some of those newer businesses there. So it's exciting to see that, there's such a gravitational pull there.
Great. I love that the answers are so consistent. People can continue to participate even if we move on to the next question. So please keep your answers coming. This is very helpful for us to get a feel for whether people are traveling through, across, and then into which segment. We have 4 different segments, and this is very helpful. It helps capture a lot of the different uses, as well as just some of the destinations and sites that Kelly described. So the next question is question 5. We still have 6 more questions to get to, so let's go ahead and jump into that next one. And this one here, so what type of road would you describe Platte Avenue to be most like? Just want to let people know that you are able to submit more than one answer. So please enter each letter of the answer that you would like to select, and then just separate it by a comma or a space. So you can select more than one. So the question is, again, what type of road would you describe Platte Avenue to be most like? So the first answer, answer A, is a residential neighborhood street. B, a major thoroughfare for east-west travel. C, former State Highway 24. Does it still feel like that to you? D, a regional connection. E, a gateway to the city of Colorado Springs. So please go ahead and select your choices now. And I will turn it back to my technical team and subject matter experts to see what they are thinking currently. It looks like we have some strong results coming in here, so I'll let them speak to it for a moment.
Well, I think the most obvious conclusion is that, currently Platte Avenue is a major thoroughfare for east-west travel. Although there's certainly people that consider it their access to their front door in their homes and their businesses. The gateway is an aspect that we heard a lot from our stakeholders that we've met with. So that's a common theme. And I think the obvious follow-up is that what it should be most like in the future?
Yeah, good point, Ted. Yep, so close to 70% of you are talking about that this is deemed a major thoroughfare for east-west travel. Okay, so please, again, go ahead, still submit your answer. In interest of time, I am going to go to question number 6. This will look and feel a little bit different than a couple of our other ones that we've already done. So this will turn into, if you're familiar with a word cloud, it'll be a great visual here in just a minute. So please pick and select one word that best describes Platte Avenue. So one word only, please. No phrases, just one word. So we are starting to see this populate. Go ahead, Kelly. It looks like you had a thought there.
Yeah, the first word that stands out to me is messy, and the second word is hectic. I think both probably have a similar connotation and probably meaning from who submitted them. I don't know if it was the same person or different, but yeah, there's a lot going on. I think when we say messy and hectic, that could be speaking to the traffic along the corridor at times. As it gets really busy, we could see there's unloved, unattractive. I think there are some negative connotation, neglected. Certainly we know that, a minimal amount of improvements have been made to the corridor since it's been decommissioned, and it's in need of improvement. And that's exactly why we're doing this plan. So I think this here is showing that is a shared sentiment and something to be addressed.
Absolutely. And we could probably even make some guesses as to which segments of the corridor some of these words more closely align to. It does change so drastically from one end to the other. It's a 6-mile stretch, so what might be the experience at one end might feel different at the other. So this is great. So many powerful words here. Thank you, everybody, for being so involved in this activity. The next question is question number 7. So on this question, people can select more than one answer as long as you separate your letter choice again with a space or a comma. So the question here is, what is currently challenging with Platte Avenue? Please answer all that apply. So choice A, crossing Platte Avenue north and south. B, traffic along the corridor going east and west. C, access to businesses. D, lack of sidewalks. E, lack of bicycle facilities. F, travel speeds. G, accessing transit. And H, other. So again, we'll give this a minute or two. And I'm going to do a spoiler alert for those of you that are not able to see it. But so far, people are selecting traffic along the corridor east and west. Ted, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think the responses to the questions certainly reflect what we've heard from all our stakeholder meetings. You know, there's just, I think the word in the word cloud, that messy that Kelly brought up, I think that's just a common theme, and it all ties back to, you know, what is the function of Platte Avenue supposed to be? Because right now it's, I think as Aaron introduced the project, you know, it's a former state highway, and it just hasn't been invested in to change that character, even though the city's grown up around it and changed. And that's certainly part of why we're doing the study, is to figure out how to better integrate Platte Avenue as city street into the transportation network and into the community.
So true. And it does look like travel speeds was the second highest ranked for this group here tonight. And we certainly heard that when I talked about the safety theme earlier as well. Okay, so a couple more questions, and then we're going to move into an activity on the website. So please hang with us. Question 8 is, what do you like most about Platte Avenue? This is an open-ended question. So please, you are welcome to type in a phrase and any of your own words. It'll show up as a quote. So this time you can use more than one word, a short phrase, or you can stick with one word if you want. So please go ahead and share your thoughts here about what do you like most about Platte Avenue. And again, I would love to hear from our technical team. What are some of your favorite features about Platte Avenue?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind for me is just the historic neighborhoods, the historic architecture, the established trees along the corridor. Yeah, the arts too. I've been really impressed with a lot of the arts along the corridor that I've seen, especially in that Nob Hill area.
Absolutely. So much character and so many nearby parks and some great trails with Shook's Run and the Legacy Loop and the monuments, lots of different historic houses. Yeah, so this is great. So it's almost like a rolling list here, and people might have more than one favorite thing about Platte Avenue. And of course, some of you might also have more experienced challenges with Platte Avenue, which we heard earlier as well. So thank you everybody for sharing some of the features and some of the current experience that you like most. It's good for us to hear that as well. And the next question, question 9. So we would like to go ahead and get your thoughts here. It's one more open-ended question and then a closing question. So what is your favorite activity to do along Platte Avenue? So please go ahead, similar to before, go ahead and type in a short phrase, your favorite activity along the current corridor. And I have somebody just typed walk my dog. I've seen lots of people walking their dogs along Platte Avenue. And I'm going to go ahead and ask Ted and Kelly one more time. What do you usually see people doing in and along Platte Avenue other than just driving in their car? Are you seeing people? Yeah, there's some great answers here.
Well, the first thing I think of is just a reminder that, as Kelly talked about, you know, we're looking at the corridor, and so it includes adjacent facilities. And so when we look at, you know, like Boulder Street that's parallel, there's a lot of people walking and biking on Boulder for sure. I think the other thing we see is a lot of people trying to cross Platte Avenue that are walking. You know, connections between the Olympic Training Center and the hospital, and up on Boulder, and you know, south to the park. There's parts of the corridor that are certainly very active for all modes, but then there's other parts that are very different. So it's hard to list just one favorite activity, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that somebody here put in the views, that they like to step outside and look at the beautiful views. And I do have to say that you have some of the most beautiful views there in that section of Colorado Springs. I agree with that. Thank you, everybody. So our last question, we're just gonna get straight to it to make sure that we have time to go over to our website and show you some great engagement activities we have going on there. So last question, what would you like to see changed as a result of this study? So this is the magic wand question. Please go ahead and type in a short phrase here. It's open-ended, just like the other ones. So please share with us, what's your vision? What would you like to see changed as a result of this study? Once we get some other answers coming in, we'll go ahead and see what people's thoughts are. And the seems like people are being very thoughtful and taking some time to put in some answers here, and that's great. There's definitely a lot of different options that you could be thinking about right now. So Kelly or Ted, does anything stick out to you right now as something that maybe we haven't heard in some of our stakeholder conversations?
I am observing them as they're rolling by. You know, I think a lot of this stuff we have heard from our stakeholder groups, but that's good, because it means we're on the right track in terms of identifying what some of the challenges are. And we certainly want to hear from more people than just from our stakeholder group. So I think this is a good exercise, and I'm glad we're recording all this.
Yeah, this is great. Good reminder too, Ted. We will be summarizing tonight's meeting. I know that that is part of some of the materials that we shared that we'll be posting on the project website, but there will be a summary from tonight to capture all of these great ideas, and that will go on the project website in the coming days. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and move on to our new activity. I want to thank everybody for your time and for participating in these polling questions. I did see some great answers coming in here, and we really do appreciate it. I saw even, for example, talking about planting more trees, keeping trees, and we did hear that as well in some of our stakeholder conversations, that tree canopy is important in the green space. So noted, and please keep these ideas coming. So the next section here, we are going to go ahead and exit the presentation. You won't notice any differences from what you're viewing, but we're going to have Kelly take us over to the project website and preview a great map-based tool with each of you. Kelly?
Great, thanks, Angela. Can you, Angela, please just confirm that you could see my screen? That you are looking at my window.
It looks great,
Kelly. Great. Yeah. So for those of you that have not been to the project website, this is our project website, our kind of live and active site. As Angela said earlier, it is coloradosprings.gov/project/. Platte-Avenue-Corridor-Study. This is what you'll find when you look at any of the project materials that have been sent out. And I just want to highlight one activity that we would welcome your participation in after this meeting. And it's an activity that will be available until June 30th, is my understanding. So there's more information here about the project that you can access, but I want to specifically show you the start activity. And when you click this button, it is going to load a map of the study area with the ability to add comments geographically on the map, to drop pins on the map. So as you can see, a splash screen comes up with a handful of just explanation and kind of introductory remarks. I think the main thing to highlight here is that we would like to hear from you on what is currently working well along the corridor and should be kind of preserved and retained or enhanced, and then what is not working well or a current challenge and needs to be addressed. Many of the things are things that you've already responded to in the Poll Everywhere activity tonight, but this will give you an additional opportunity to show us on a map where those current opportunities and challenges are. So simply from here, you're going to hit the Get Started Now. And this is what will pop up. It's a little bit more about kind of step-by-step how you participate in the activity. If you're pretty well versed in working online, I would say you can go immediately to add comment, and it will pull up a handful of these marker types. So we have 5 primary categories related to pedestrians, bicycles, transit, vehicles, and community. For all of those, the working well is the star, and the concern, the area of concern, is the exclamation point sign here. So choose any of those that you would like to drop. I'll come back and show you how to do that in a minute, but we'll just zoom in here. There are a handful of comments that have already been left. So for example, let's just look at this star. It says, Williamette is a great biking experience. This was added, I'll tell you guys, this went live just a few hours ago, and we saw comments coming in immediately. So if you went to the project website to access the public meeting link, thank you in advance to whoever took the time to start populating some of these. And we as a project team and as technical experts added a handful of comments as well from the conversations that we had with stakeholders. So when you pull up a comment, you can reply to that comment by starting a discussion. You would just add your kind of initial comments here related to this overall comment. You can also like this comment or dislike this comment, showing that you are in agreement or in disagreement with whatever that comment is. Or, like I was saying, you can add your own comment. So, for example, here at Union, scooters, and the extreme frustration being caught behind cars and some of the businesses there. So these are just a handful of things that we have already added or have been added in the last couple of hours by users. If you'd like to see all of the comments, you can go to this activity button and just start to scroll down. The color coding is consistent with the type of comment that was added. So as a part of this tutorial here, I'm just going to hit add comment for, let's say, community working well. Here's the marker. We heard that people visit this retail quite a bit here on Academy, so we'll add that. And say I visit this retail often. Adding your name, adding your zip code, or adding your email, it's all optional. If you'd like more project information, I would recommend adding your email and we'll be in contact with you. And then I will just hit add comment. It'll add it to the map. You'll get a confirmation window that pops up and you can just X out of that. And then there it is. There's the comment. And then you can add as many as you would like. So Like I said, this activity is just a follow-up to our discussion tonight where we'd like more specific information from you. Feel free to send this activity to your neighbors, your friends, your coworkers who may have interest in the corridor as well. We'd love to get feedback from as many people as possible. And if you have questions, the contact information for all of us lives on this project website as well. So we'd be happy to help facilitate if there's any issues or I would say technical issues or issues that you would like to discuss along the corridor.
Great, Kelly. We will go back into our presentation. And I just want to thank you for going through how to access the project website, how to get to the digital engagement map-based tool. And again, please remember to participate and go in and provide your comments and take a look at what others are saying, like Kelly said, between now and June 30th. It'll be really helpful for us to get some site-specific feedback from you. So I have great news. We have time for a couple of your questions. We've received about a dozen questions so far. I think we'll get to at least 3 or 4 of those really quickly here. And again, keep an eye on the website because we will post materials there as well, including a frequently asked question document. So the first question that I am going to read came in from a participant, first name Judith. Thank you for submitting this question, Judith. Who will monitor the Section 106 process for the historic resources along the corridor? Dan, would you like to take this question and answer this for us tonight?
I'd be happy to. So we definitely understand that the historic resources in the corridor are important, and especially along Platte, but also pretty much everything east or west of Union has that historic nature, not only from the houses and buildings and architecture, but true symbols of the city like General Palmer and Acacia Park. So that's something we're going to definitely look at and have team members on board to look at. So as we kind of work through the project, we will be evaluating and identifying all these different features. In addition, the consultant team has Pinion Environmental on board to help us with that, and they're very good at historic resources and many other environmental kind of resource identification. And then the only kind of twist on this is the Section 106 process is more applicable to state and federally funded projects than it is to what we're doing right now. But I think we'll be working in that spirit. So I think as things move forward, we may consult with the State Historic Preservation Office as we work through things.
Great, thank you, Dan, for sharing those thoughts. And I know this question has come up before, so we appreciate you submitting that question tonight, Judith. The next question that we are going to take is from somebody anonymous. And so we will go ahead and I'll summarize this a little bit. It's a great detailed question. So while making improvements is much needed from an infrastructure perspective, has anyone or will anyone be considering the economic, housing, and high traffic impacts of expanding the corridor to potentially connect to I-25? In doing this, it might bring more business, but could also increase the cost of housing, for example, in the area in sections that are typically lower income. So some great questions there about how to balance the study with all of the different interests and potential needs. And Ted, I would like you to go ahead and help us answer this question tonight for our participants that have joined us.
Well, I'm going to do my best, but as you said, it's a detailed question, and we may have to type some of this up in our Q&A that we post online. I'll take the genesis of this question as, you know, that piece about a direct connection to And I would say the initiation of this project was actually conceived back in 2012 before the PPRTA ballot initiative. This was a project that was identified and it included a study to evaluate that direct connection to I-25. The city, as we were scoping this project and this study and getting it started, the city realized that that question is a lot more detailed, and certainly the answer has probably evolved since in the last 10 years. I can tell you from some of our early stakeholder meetings that direct connection is still it's a question of what should the function of Platte Avenue be. That was our first kind of theme that we listed when we listed our stakeholder themes, was just trying to decide what is the function of Platte Avenue from I-25 to Powers, and understanding that those different character areas have different needs. Certainly Platte Avenue represents a huge investment and a huge opportunity because it's a significant public right-of-way that we need to figure out how to make highest and best use of. But we have expanded the scope of the study, or I should say included in the scope of the study, a detailed look at the economics, the land use, the preservation or protection or support for those wonderful neighborhoods that exist along the corridor. And all that stuff is being taken into consideration. And that's actually the benefit of those 6 goal areas in the goal framework that Kelly presented early in the presentation tonight. We're worried, or we're considering, not worried, we're considering everything from sustainability, quality of life, the environment, and economic issues, as well as accessibility, connectedness, and that's not just the transportation connections, but it's also how well is the roadway connected to those adjacent land uses. So I think that question about I-25 connectivity and, is this corridor about moving people and cars and buses? Does it have some other roles? That's kind of the next step in our process as we kind of collate and sift through this information that we have, the input that we've received, as well as our technical analysis. And whoever posted that, I would ask that you continue to stay engaged and help keep informing us about what the right solution might be.
Great, thank you so much, Ted. And Ted, do you think in 60 seconds or less, can you explain to participants really quickly as well, essentially just will the study and the potential improvements be focused only in the downtown area, or will it be the full corridor? Can you answer that question for us before I take us into next steps and closing remarks?
Absolutely. The study covers the whole study area that was shown from the Powers interchange basically to I-25, north and south of Platte Avenue as well, because there's certainly parallel facilities. Some of the improvements that may be recommended may not even be on Platte Avenue. They could be on adjacent facilities. We're really trying to integrate this corridor, and I use the definition that we do, into the community better to serve both current and future land uses and businesses and residents.
Great. Thank you so much, Ted. I can tell people are getting hungry. It's dinner time. We're starting to lose a few people. So with our last couple minutes here, I will take a question, but use it to dovetail into next steps and closing remarks. So we did have another question from a participant asking, how will we engage with residents and community members going forward? So that's a fantastic question to basically go into next steps. So we would like to forward the slide here, and again, thank everyone for participating in the Platte Avenue Corridor Study Virtual Community Meeting Kickoff. You can see up on the screen ways to stay connected with us. So please make sure to go to the project website. We've mentioned it a few times tonight. That's coloradosprings.gov/Platte Ave, A-V-E, corridor, C-O-R-R-I-D-O-R. There's also a project email, info@platteavstudy.com, and we have a project phone number as well. We just want to make sure that there's multiple ways for community members and residents to be able to reach out to us. Also, it's very important that we have you sign up to receive project emails. So if you provided your information to the meeting tonight to join, we now have you on our email list and you'll continue to hear from us. In the next several months, we'll be going out and doing more segment specific activities and talking directly with community members. A lot of the information and next steps will be shared on the project website, but I know another question that came in was, will there be future surveys and will there be ways for others in the neighborhood to participate? And yes, there will be. And we're also making sure to use and utilize our community advisory committee members. And the roster of those members is also available on the project website, but it does include a lot of residential groups and stakeholders, as well as a variety of other services and advocacy groups in the community. So we would like to hear from you. Please do stay involved. There will be more activities and events coming up over the next several months, and I imagine they'll continue to be a hybrid, some in person and some virtual, as we continue to come through the COVID-19 pandemic and start to see hopefully more people in person in the coming months. So before we sign off for the night, I would like to also recognize that we had some elected officials join us, and I wish I would have noticed that earlier, but I would like to say thank you to some of those elected officials. And I do see here that Councilwoman Hinjum was able to join us tonight. And I believe there was a few other advisory board and stakeholder CAC members as well. And we really appreciate all of your participation. So again, please participate. Go to the project website, give us your feedback on these initial comment cards and map-based activities before June 30th. Thank you for coming. And now I will hand it over to Dan Kruger for closing remarks. Dan?
Great. So I'd truly like to thank you, Angela, and then all the participants who have joined us for this meeting from the community. This is kind of an odd public meeting format for me. It's less personal than I prefer because it's not live in person, but appreciate that. So a couple of other comments. One is although this is a study, there are some much needed improvements that are going to have to happen relatively soon. And that's maybe 5 years out, but the Platte Avenue Bridge over Shook's Run was built in 1902 and is one of the 2 oldest structures in town. And that it's wearing out. The Platte Avenue or the El Paso Street bridge or group of bridges over Platte Avenue just east of Wasatch are also, the bridge decks are in poor condition. I think everybody would like some resolution to the I-25 connection in the north part of downtown. Very tricky issue. So that's, we plan to solve that as part of the project. And then there's just some weird inconsistencies along the corridor. It kind of starts as a big road on the east side and then funnels down to a much smaller and harder road to travel on the west side. And that brings up that question that Ted hit on of what is the function? Is it a pass-through road or to I-25, or is it more of a destination to downtown? So as we move forward, we are committed to encourage having ongoing dialogue with everyone who will take time with us to participate and share their thoughts. We are always glad to meet with people to talk about the corridor. Like I said, in person is a preference. So if you wish to do that, just contact us through the project website. And then for us over the next several months, we'll be conducting additional outreach and hosting segments specific activities along the corridor to get input about each different character section. So with that, I think I will do a final thank you and wish you all a good rest of the night.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dan. Have a good night, everyone. Bye-bye.